When people talk about the greatest zombies maps ever created, names like Origins, Mob of the Dead, Der Eisendrache always dominate the conversation. Those maps have incredible Easter eggs, unforgettable stories, and gameplay systems that completely change what zombies could be. But there's one map that almost never gets the respect it deserves. A map that doesn't rely on cinematic cutscenes, a map that doesn't need a complicated quest, a map that doesn't even give you a wonder weapon. Instead, it relies on one thing: fear. That map is verrückt. Originally released in March of 2009 as part of the first downloadable content pack of Call of Duty World at War, verrückt completely transformed what players thought zombies could become. It introduced features that are now considered staples of the mode: Coca-Cola machines, electric traps, and a power switch, while also delivering one of the most terrifying experiences Treyarch has ever designed. Even after almost 20 years now, many players still consider the original World at War version to be better and creepier than the Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 3 remake. And verrückt was such a humongous step forward for the zombies community that a lot of people forget why it's so remembered. Nocturne Toten was such an incredibly small and simple map. It had no perks, no power, no traps, no pack-a-punch, just survive. It worked because it was something nobody has ever played before, but Treyarch knew they couldn't simply release another tiny survival map. So when they began working on their first DLC Zombies experience, they completely changed the formula. Verrückt wasn't just another map, it was proof that zombies could evolve. Players suddenly had objectives: find the power, meet up with your teammates, choose your perks to buy, learn trapped locations, memorize dangerous hallways. Every mechanic forced players to think differently. Look back today, almost everything we associate with classic zombies began right here. It's also one of the most perfect locations to put a zombies map. Now, imagine if verrückt had taken place inside of an ordinary office building. It probably wouldn't have been nearly as memorable, right? Instead, Treyarch chose one of horror's most iconic settings: an abandoned asylum. Hospitals already make many people uncomfortable, myself included. Now imagine one that's been abandoned during World War II. Lights barely work, wheelchairs sit empty, medical equipment is scattered everywhere, the walls are stained with blood, patients' rooms are left exactly as they were, everything feels frozen in time. Unlike later maps that feel almost like a action movie, verrückt feels believable. It feels like somewhere that could actually exist, and that's exactly why it's so disturbing. Also, if you just sit around verrückt and just listen to the sounds, they get so under your skin. Most horror games rely on jump scares, verrückt rarely does. Instead, it slowly builds tension through sound. Listen carefully while standing still. You'll hear distant screams, random crying, metal banging somewhere inside the building, doors slamming, echoing footsteps, and a strange whisper that never fully reveals the source. One of the biggest reasons verrückt remains terrifying is because of its layout. Almost every room feels cramped. There are very few places where you can breathe. Instead of wide open training areas, you're forced into tight corridors, narrow staircases, and small hospital rooms. Every turn is blind. You never know if 5 zombies are waiting just around the corner. Modern zombies often lets players escape mistakes. Verrückt doesn't. One wrong move usually means you're trapped. That consistent pressure keeps players nervous throughout the entire match. The map never allows you to relax, and because of that, every round feels dangerous. One of the first things players notice when they load into verrückt is that something feels wrong. If you're playing co-op, your team doesn't spawn together. Instead, you're separated. Half the team begins on one side of the asylum, while the other half starts on the opposite side. A heavy metal gate blocks the center of the map, making it impossible to reunite until someone reaches the power switch. Today, that mechanic might not sound that big of a deal, but in 2009, it completely changed how people played zombies, me included. On Nocturne Toten, everyone stayed together from the moment the match started. If someone went down, they were usually only a few steps away. Verrückt shattered that sense of security. From the opening seconds, every player had to survive on their own. Imagine spawning into an unfamiliar map with zombies pouring through the windows, hearing your friends over the microphone, but having absolutely no way to reach them. They could hear you fighting for your life, but they couldn't help. The feeling of helplessness was unlike anything players have experienced before. Even after the gate opened, that early game panic stayed with you. It taught players a lesson that would become a core part of zombies for years to come. Communication always saves lives. Verrückt also had the fastest zombies yet. If the map's atmosphere wasn't enough to make players nervous, the zombies themselves certainly were. Compared to Nocturne Totem, the undead in Verrückt felt way more aggressive. They climbed through windows faster, recovered from obstacles way more quickly, and before long, they began sprinting directly at you. And at the time, seeing a zombie sprinting right at you was fucking terrifying. It also forced players to rethink everything they knew about surviving. Camping became much more dangerous. Reloading at the wrong time could instantly get you cornered. Every decision had to be made quickly, because hesitation often meant death. But with that said, one of the greatest strengths of Verrückt is its pacing. Many zombies maps have a moment where the tension disappears. Once you're set up with good weapons and perks, you can settle into a routine. Verrückt never really gives you that luxury. Even with Juggernaut, Speed Cola, and the map constantly reminds you that you're trapped inside a crumbling asylum, the hallways are still tight, the corners are still dangerous, one mistake can still end your game. That constant pressure is what keeps the map exciting, even after hundreds of playthroughs. It's not difficult because it's unfair, it's difficult because it demands your attention every second you're alive. I've already talked about Perk-Colas already in the video, but it's almost impossible to imagine zombies without them. Juggernog, Speed Cola, Quick Revive, Double Tap, today they are iconic, but Verrückt was the map that introduced them to the world. Each perk fundamentally changed the way players approached survival. Juggernog gave players the durability they desperately needed, Speed Cola rewarded aggressive players by reducing reload times, Quick Revive encouraged teammates to reduce one another instead of giving up. Double Tap increased your firepower even if the original version wasn't nearly as powerful as the one we know today. Those machines weren't just gameplay. They gave the map personality. The colorful bottles, catchy jingles, and unique machine designs became symbols of the zombies mode itself. Without Verrückt, it's hard to imagine zombies becoming the phenomenon it is today. Verrückt was also the beginning of environmental storytelling. Unlike later maps filled with radios, cutscenes, and lengthy dialogues, Verrückt tells your story through the world itself. You don't need a narrator to explain that terrible things happened here. The evidence is everywhere. Hospital beds sit abandoned, medical equipment has been left behind, bloodstains covered the floors. Every room tells its own silent story. The game trusts the players to notice these details, and because of that, the horror feels more personal. Instead of being told what happened to you, you begin to imagine it yourself. And sometimes your imagination is far scarier than anything the game could have already shown you. If you played Verrückt, you probably experienced something strange, even after dozens of matches. Even when you know the map by heart, it still makes you feel uneasy. That's something very few zombie maps can claim. Most maps lose their fear factor once you learn the layout. The mystery disappears and the horror slowly turns into routine. Verrückt is different. The fear doesn't come from not knowing where to go. It comes from the atmosphere itself. Every hallway feels oppressive. Every room feels abandoned. Every sound makes you question what's around the next corner. But that's because Treyarch understood one of the most important rules of horror. What you don't see is often scarier than what you do. The game rarely tries to surprise you with cheap jump scares. Instead, it creates a constant feeling that something is wrong. You never truly feel safe. And that's exactly what horror is supposed to do. One of the reasons Verrückt is so memorable is because the asylum feels like a real place instead of a multiplayer map filled with zombies. Look closely at the environment. Patient records are scattered across the desk, hospital beds are overturned as people fled in panic, broken windows allow faint light to spill into the dark corridors. None of these details affect gameplay. They're simply there to make the world feel believable. So after all these years, why are we still talking about Verrückt? It isn't because it's the biggest map. It isn't because it's got a massive Easter egg. We're still talking about it because it understood fear. Verrückt didn't rely on cutscenes or complicated quests. Instead, it made players feel trapped, vulnerable, and constantly on edge. Every hallway felt dangerous, every scream added to the tension, and every mistake could cost you everything. It also changed zombies forever, introducing Perca-Colas, the power switch, and gameplay mechanics that became staples of the mode. Nearly 2 decades later, and players still return to the abandoned asylum. Not because it's easy, but because it feels great.